Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me today, even though it's virtually. I am truly honored to be here with you and to discuss such a critical topic for insurance companies in Taiwan. First, let me express my gratitude to the various insurance associations of Taiwan who kindly invited Fidelity to speak today. I am Pierre-Emmanuel Brard, and I am leading insurance solutions for Fidelity in Asia Pacific. I have been working with the insurance industry for over 16 years as Chief Investment Officer and later supporting AIA Group CIOs in the region. With insurance solution resources in Fidelity, we have first-hand experience on the challenges brought by new accounting and regulatory regimes. We hope that what I will share today will facilitate further reflection regarding both the localization of ICS capital standards in Taiwan and the necessary evolution of asset liability management. So let's get started. Globally, evolving regulatory landscape have consistently posed challenges for insurance companies. Therefore, adapting asset allocation practices, refining investment management frameworks, and fully utilizing the various regulatory levers will be critical for a successful transition. Later, we will look at some of the incentives provided by regulators in both Europe and Asia to support the industry. But first, let's highlight few of the transitional measures that will take effect in Taiwan. First, there will be a 15-year window to transition from the current regime to the new Taiwan ICS. In other Asian jurisdictions, transition periods have varied from none to up to 10 years. Gradual increase of the interest rate risk charge is a good measure, as it can be expensive if not well managed. It will allow time to adjust fixed income portfolio and improve industry practice over the management of duration gap, for which easing the use of derivative instruments could also be an avenue to consider. More recently, the SFC has introduced a differentiated regulation and incentive plan for insurers. It aims at encouraging the industry to strengthen its capital management framework and to diversify the business mix with more capital-efficient products. By doing so, insurance companies will have the ability to increase their investment quota to certain asset classes. Let's now take a look at some of the best practices we've seen globally with regards to the localization of capital standards beyond transitional measures. Today, I want to highlight three key features from Europe that are worth considering. The first feature is the long-term equity feature, which significantly reduces the capital charge for equity holdings in the European Economic Area. This reduction comes with specific criteria such as ring-fencing the long-term equity holdings, having a clear holding period of at least 5 years, implying limited turnover, demonstrating through ALM stress test that there will be no forced sales within a 10-year period. The long-term equity feature can also apply to both low-risk investment funds and specific unlisted equity holdings. One of the reasons for regulator to favor this feature is the long-term ownership of equity holdings, which support capital markets and promotes sustained engagement with investment companies. This can help with influencing them to transition to a low-carbon economy. While the feature has been implemented, its usage has not been as widespread as initially expected. Currently, the EIOPA is reviewing the regulation to extend its application to OECD stocks, to expand its use to non-life activities, to remove the ring-fencing requirement, to allow for some level of turnover within the long-term equity portfolio, and at last, lessen the forced sales criteria. The second feature I want to discuss is qualified infrastructure. In several jurisdictions, supporting infrastructure is critical, and in Taiwan, current RBC regime favors these investments. Similarly, in Europe, infrastructure investments are critical, and insurance companies are well positioned to support it, as it aligns well with their long-term liabilities. Thus, in 2016, the EIOPA introduced qualified infrastructure investments, which covers both equity and debt investments within the European Economic Area. These investments are subject to a specific framework and must involve either projects or companies that derive a majority of their revenue from operating infrastructure assets. For equity in infrastructure projects, the capital charge is reduced to 30% from 49%, while for qualifying corporate equity, it is reduced to 36%. On the debt side, there is a significant reduction in credit spread shocks, ranging from 25 to 30% of the initial stress. These changes greatly favor the inclusion of infrastructure within the investment portfolio. Lastly, in the UK, the asset eligibility for matching adjustment portfolio has been extended. Assets with highly predictable cash flow are now part of eligible assets. The cash flow variability can relate to either the business cycle or other economic factors. Examples of such assets include callable bonds or securities with payoff linked to environmental and social KPIs. The UK PRA also introduced a notching element in the computation of the MS spread, as well as new matching test requirements to manage the introduction of lower cash flow predictability. These examples from Europe offer valuable insights into how regulatory framework can evolve to better support the industry's needs. And they might provide useful cases for Taiwan's own ICS localization efforts. Let's now turn into Asia. There are also three features I would like to highlight. The first feature is an incentive for green bond investment, promoting the acceleration of sustainable investing. While the exact definition of a green bond has yet to be published, the idea is to encourage investments in green bonds by reducing their capital charge. This is achieved by applying a 0.9 factor on credit spread shock. The second feature pertains to matching adjustment in Hong Kong. In addition to having an extensive list of eligible assets for cash flow matching, insurance companies applying matching adjustment are permitted to recognize 100 basis points of matching adjustment spread uplift for their equity and property exposure. The intent here is to acknowledge the benefit of gross assets in fulfilling long-term liabilities commitments. This feature is specifically applicable to participating and universal life portfolios, which exhibit long liabilities. The final feature that might be of interest deals with the treatment of foreign currency mismatch. In Singapore, insurers soundly rely on offshore investments to diversify their portfolio. In order not to attract a hefty currency risk charge, insurers usually do hedge the currency risk, bearing significant cost of hedging, which can be detrimental to long-term investment returns and in turn to policyholders. To encourage a more economic approach in managing the cost of hedging, as opposed to managing the cost of capital, the currency mismatch risk charge is computed on the net currency position minus a relief of 10% of the total asset value. In short, it is an allowance of up to 10% to unhedged investments. Beyond specific features, there are several important principles that are widely adopted and could be valuable for Taiwan to consider. Two key principles stand out: the look-through principle and the risk mitigation principle. The look-through principle is extensively used under Solvency II, Korean ICS, Hong Kong's RBC, and Singapore RBC2 frameworks. The main objective is to reveal the true risk characteristic of fund investments, allowing insurers to accurately reflect those risks when computing capital charge. A challenge, however, lies with the operationalization of the look-through. In all these jurisdictions, this process is facilitated by the tripartite template, referred as TPT reporting. It provides a line-by-line of all securities within an investment fund. And in Europe, this template is not just widely adopted, it is a reporting requirement for any asset manager working with insurance companies. The second principle is the risk mitigation principle. Under Solvency II, risk mitigation techniques are strongly encouraged. For instance, for a long-short investment strategy, instead of applying a 39% capital charge across the fund investments, insurer can look through and recognize the risk mitigation of negative equity exposure, subject to demonstrated limited basis risk from a currency, geography, and sector standpoint. Korean ICS have adopted similar approach by providing clarity on the treatment of long-short strategy. These risk mitigation techniques are crucial for supporting investment strategies that enhance risk management from an economic perspective, as they often exhibit low correlation to other asset classes. However, their effective use often relies on their clarity and interpretation. Clear guidance from regulators can help the industry to leverage these techniques more efficiently. Now that we have discussed some of the features favored by other jurisdictions, it's important to understand the impact of transitioning to new standards on both strategic asset allocation and investment management. Here are some key considerations. The new regulatory framework is market consistent, meaning that liabilities become much more sensitive to market volatility. adopting features like matching adjustment to manage balance sheet volatility has become important. Strategic asset allocation frameworks are becoming more complex as it is required to balance both economic, regulatory, and accounting capital. To achieve this, it is essential to refine asset liability management techniques by closely integrating liability structure into the asset allocation process, leveraging on advanced portfolio construction tools or liability matching portfolio advisory. Expanding the investment universe remains essential for diversification, both from capital and economic perspective. Globally, we've seen a shift towards high-quality, long-dated credit, as well as invested in infrastructure investments and private credit when look-through is applied. From an accounting standards perspective, aligning the choice of liability measurements model with IFRS 9 classification is critical and has influenced investment strategies and how they are measured. For instance, if the general measurement model is chosen, insurer may opt for fair value through OCI classification. This approach favors buy and maintain strategies for which book yields, spread, and default experience are key performance measurement criteria. On the other hand, if the variable fee approach is selected, the fair value through P&L approach may be preferred under IFRS 9 classification. This may allow for a more active management of the fixed income portfolio. A relevant performance measurement for such investment style will then be an excess return over a customized liability benchmark, which is widely used by pension funds and has seen increased interest from insurance companies in both Europe and Asia. Considering all those constraints will make strategic asset allocation work more complex. Having to deal with competing objectives, such as economic risk, regulatory risk, and accounting risk, is a challenge, and expertise is required on a number of topics, such as implementing a liability-driven strategic asset allocation, constructing capital and accounting-aware portfolio, and setting up robust capital market assumptions, while potentially also having to consider the effect of climate risk on them. So how can we address it? First, having a robust framework on capital market assumption is critical. Making sure to cover a broad investment universe with clarity around its capital treatment will allow to build resilient and diversified portfolio while considering their return on capital. For instance, looking at this graph, we can see that direct lending with look-through is capital efficient. Local real estate as well offer attractive return on capital and can be considered as part of a long-term return-seeking portfolio. Managing interest rate risk is paramount under the new standards. Adopting a liability-driven strategic asset allocation through a two-portfolio approach, a liability matching portfolio and a return-seeking portfolio, is an efficient approach to optimizing your ILM and hence your capital. When looking at the liability matching portfolio, what matters is to have a strong bottom-up security selection that can achieve efficient cash flow and duration matching with high-quality credit. Doing so is crucial to reducing both interest rate risk and credit spread risk. It takes the right tools and infrastructure, but having looked at numerous balance sheets, I can ascertain there is a significant amount of capital to be released by simply optimizing a liability matching portfolio. This capital can be partially reinvested within a return-seeking portfolio that is optimized using a top-down approach, leveraging on robust capital market assumption, generating excess return in a risk-controlled manner to deliver value for both policyholder and shareholder. The last step is to combine those two portfolios, making sure liability cash flow shortfalls are minimized under a wide range of scenarios, delivering an asset allocation which can be optimal from a capital perspective, generating the right level of returns and resilient under stress scenario. There are few considerations when constructing a liability matching portfolio. First, we need to match the liability profile considering cash flow shortfall and matching adjustment spread optimization. Second, the interest rate sensitivities need to be considered and managed over time. Developing a liability benchmark that takes into account the key rate duration profile of the liability can be helpful. Third, selecting high credit quality at the right level of yield will help minimizing the credit spread risk and mitigating balance sheet volatility that IFRS 9 expected credit loss can bring. Developing or leveraging on the right expertise and tool to optimize such portfolio will help insurance company to unlock capital. On our hand, we leverage on a new generation of portfolio management tool, able to integrate all these constraints and support insurance companies in extracting much-needed value from their balance sheet. We name it Optimus. Turning to the return-seeking portfolio. Having a robust CMA framework based on a broad investment universe, including listed equity, alternative credit, and private asset, will help optimizing a portfolio which is capital efficient and demonstrate economic resilience at the same time. Fidelity have run several optimizations for various clients in Taiwan. What we can say is that in terms of asset class risk and capital dynamics, government bonds and investment-grade credits are not only attractive from a return on capital perspective, but both are critical in mitigating the interest rate mismatch. Direct lending, if look-through is enabled, offers strong return on capital characteristic. Domestic infrastructure debt and real estate are also attractive, especially during the phase-in transition period. Developed market and emerging market equities offer limited upside from a return on capital perspective. However, they are essential to building a diversified portfolio and play a fundamental role in any liquidity management framework. On the other hand, we believe hybrids and high-yield bonds offer limited value and should have limited room in the asset allocation. With that comes the end of my presentation. So I will be leaving you with a few notes that I wanted to share. Besides learning from jurisdiction abroad, it's important to take away a few points on strategic asset allocation, such as putting the liability structure at the heart of the asset allocation process, and having a disciplined credit portfolio construction, leveraging on the right infrastructure and tools, for which advisory from experts may help with unlocking value already there in your balance sheet. I hope the session was interesting and that it will emulate new discussions both within your companies, but also with the broader insurance ecosystem. Thank you very much for listening to me.
投资一定有风险，基金投资有赚有赔，申购前应详阅公开说明书或投资人须知。